Hey, I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and today I'm at the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show. And every year they have some sort of a theme for their Gem and Mineral Show. And this year it's about pegmatites, the big crystals, the big crystals that are found in pegmatites. And I did a video a little bit ago about gem pockets, and you guys really like that. And one of the chief forms of gem pockets, one of the big sources of gem minerals, is the pegmatite crystals. And so I'm going to show you around and show you a little bit more detail about pegmatites and about the gems that they form, because they're really amazing. So come along with me.
Hey, I'm back at home. So I wanted to talk to you from the floor of the gem show and basically take you around at the gem show and show you some of these amazing specimens and the prices that they sell for. But as you saw in the first part of the video, the echo of the giant auditorium was just too much. You have no idea. When I got back the raw footage that I had recorded there, I knew that the auditorium was loud and I had to fiddle with it. Actually, the background noise was much louder than my voice, and I had to fiddle with it in editing to get my voice up to where my voice is louder than the background. All the noise in the background. So anyway, we're going to do this a little bit different than I had originally hoped for. I'm going to be talking to you here at the whiteboard and showing you some pictures, and we're going to go over it. Now, pegmatites, they've always been a huge interest of mine. When I was a teenager, I lived in the LA area, and my grandparents lived in the northern part of San Diego County. And of course, North San Diego County is where there's some really amazing pegmatites. And I used to go kick around there and explore some of the old mine dumps and that kind of stuff. It was great. It was a great time. But this gem show, it's just amazing. Let me show you a picture of what the floor looks like.
Now, this is really not even half of the total booths at the show. There's a couple of hundred dealers there, that the finest dealers in the world in crystals, minerals, jewelry, and that sort of thing. And it extends from one end to the other, and there's an extra room that's not even shown here. There's quite a few dealers to the left of the view of this picture. Anyway, it's just huge.
Now, as I said, if I'd have been able to take you with me and go around to the different vendors and mineral sellers at the show, I would have shown you some of these amazing crystals that they had for sale, and the amazing expensive prices. So beautiful, so expensive. Let's take a look at some of the still photos that I got from the show. They're really amazing.
So my point with these photos is to show you how beautiful these specimens are, while at the same time showing you how incredibly valuable and expensive they are. This is a beautiful piece of aquamarine and quartz from Pakistan. There's a couple of little rods of black tourmaline and a big quartz crystal, and of course the beautiful blue piece of aquamarine there. And you'll notice the price, $17,800. That's very valuable. Here's some more aquamarine. The tall crystal here is probably 8 inches and 2 inches in diameter. The smaller crystal is about the same diameter, but much shorter. The white at the bottom is the wall of the pocket that these giant crystals grew into. And you can see the price for a large crystal like this of a nice blue aquamarine, asking $40,000. My point is, these are valuable and worth going after. Here's a single crystal with no matrix attached. It was a loose crystal in a pocket. And the left-hand side of this aquamarine crystal is nice and gemmy, but the right-hand side is actually not gemmy at all. And yet, even though this is not a crystal on matrix, there's only one crystal, it's still $3,900. There was plenty of aquamarine, of course, on display, but there was also some really beautiful kunzite, which is what this is. This is a single crystal, again, not attached to any matrix. It's nice and good sized, and a lot of it is gemmy, but this is maybe a 6-inch tall by 2.5-inch diameter crystal, and the price, $25,000. I hope you're getting the idea that prospecting for these gem pockets and these gem minerals is well worth doing. Now, this is a much smaller crystal, again with no matrix. This is probably 4 inches by 1 inch in size, but it's just a small crystal and it's $900. Now, I have lots of crystals this size and larger myself, but in my collection, but I didn't pay anything nearly this much. And what I'm trying to tell you is the price for these nice crystals has gone up a lot in recent decades. Now, kunzite is a form of the mineral spodumene, and spodumene comes in a number of colors, including yellow, and this is the yellow form of spodumene. And you can see this is a crystal probably similar in size to the first one I showed you that was $25,000. So the kunzite is more expensive, but even so, even a yellow crystal is still $10,000. It's very gemmy and nice, but again, $10,000 is a lot of money. Now, I showed you several aquamarine crystals and their prices, and the mineral that aquamarine is beryl, and beryl also comes in other colors. Of course, the most famous is green, that's an emerald, but it also comes in pink, and this is commonly found in a lot of pegmatite deposits, and this is a beautifully formed pink morganite or pink beryl crystal, and check out the price. They were asking for this beautiful specimen on matrix, well formed. It's very nice, very artistic, but $150,000 was the asking price for this beautiful specimen. Again, the prices are amazing, but the point is, making 1 or 2 finds like this can really make your year, make your decade. So it's an amazing specimen, but $150,000. Here's another specimen of pink beryl morganite. This is a part of a pegmatite pocket wall where you see the light brown tan colored quartz, and then the white is both some feldspar and some mica. But then along this wall of this pegmatite grew a nice pink beryl crystal. And it's a nice specimen, not nearly as nice as the last one, but still a nice specimen, and the asking price is $15,500. Here's a piece of pink beryl morganite. This one I think is maybe even too overpriced for the market. It's not a well-formed crystal specimen. You can see it's been etched, and so you don't have a regular crystal faces on it. May have a few little gemmy parts to it, but it's not a completely clear crystal. It was a floater, meaning it was loose. It wasn't attached to the wall of a pegmatite, so it doesn't have any matrix. And they're still asking $35,000. This piece is really maybe 3.5 inches by 2.5 inches wide. That's maybe a little expensive. I would think a more normal price for this might be more like $5,000 minus the 30. But still, it's a very valuable piece of crystal. This is yet another piece of pink beryl morganite. This is a larger piece. This thing was maybe 5+ inches in diameter, so it's good sized, and it does have some good crystal faces on it, and a little bit of matrix and some needles of black tourmaline. It's not super gemmy, although you can see through parts of it. It has decent morganite pink color. But the price, $38,500 that they were asking for this. Again, these things have moved up a lot in price, and a few finds can really pay for a lot of effort. And certainly don't want to leave off tourmaline. Tourmaline is one of the most famous gemstones found in pegmatites and pegmatite pockets. I'll show you a few here. This one here it's about 8-9 inches long, so it's a good size specimen. And the 2 large pink crystals here do have some gemmy areas inside them, and you got a nice matrix with the lavender lepidolite and then the quartz that these things are resting in. But still, $40,000 for this specimen. That's an amazingly high price even for a beautiful crystal specimen like this. Okay, here's some more tourmaline, and these crystals, of course, are green and maybe not quite as gemmy, but still they've got some matrix, a couple of crystals growing on matrix, and the price is $16,000. Here's another piece of tourmaline. This crystal is about an inch by maybe 4+ inches long, and it is on matrix, and it's a gemmy and a very beautiful color, beautiful crystal specimen. But the price again, $36,000. I'm hoping I'm getting through to you and impressing you how valuable these crystal specimens are. Here's a nice tourmaline crystal matched with 2 beautiful quartz crystals growing on it. And I could go on showing you these amazing specimens for much longer, but I think I've made my point of how valuable they really are, and that you don't have to find a pile of them in order to make an awful lot of money. And the truth is, even if you don't have the highest level of gemmy crystals that sell for tens of thousands of dollars, they still are quite valuable and can be worth quite a bit of money, to the point that they're well worth the prospector seeking after, going after, and making some effort to find.
Let's talk now about how pegmatites deposits form. Now, pegmatites are a specific kind of rock. They're a kind of rock that has a huge variability in crystal sizes. Generally speaking, the crystals are much larger than you would expect from your average granite or other similar gabbro, other similar rock. Those often have small crystals. Pegmatites can have big, gigantic crystals. So pegmatites are special in that they form in basically when a magma, and that's a molten rock. That's what a geologist calls molten rock that hasn't reached the surface. Once magma reaches the surface, then it becomes lava. But below the surface, they call it magma. And as the molten rock, if it comes close enough to the surface, then it starts to cool slowly, but it doesn't actually erupt onto the surface, but it just comes close enough that it starts to slowly cool. Well, minerals crystallize out of that melt. And you might get, depending on what the melt is made of, what different elements are in that molten rock, you might get quartz, you might get feldspar, you might get other minerals, and micas, and different kinds of minerals. I won't go into all the details. There's zillions of different kinds of minerals that might form from these cooling magma bodies, but they still form in smallish crystals. Well, as it cools and cools and cools, there's some types of chemicals or elements or that sort of thing that just don't fit into the other minerals. So when a piece of quartz is crystallizing, or feldspar or mica, or some of these others, amphiboles and that kind of stuff, when they're cooling, these elements just don't fit into the crystal structure. And so as it cools, these elements that are originally just in tiny traces get concentrated and concentrated and concentrated, because as the other stuff cools, there's still left over. One of the things that's left over too is water. And so water doesn't fit as well into a lot of these crystal forms. And so you end up with a concentration of water and rare elements. And the rare elements include things like lithium and boron, beryllium, cesium, and a host of other different elements. And as the final bits start to cool and there's all this water, the water gives a chance for some of this stuff to dissolve and grow into really big crystals. And that's how you get crystals of beryl or tourmaline, kunzite, and other kinds of minerals, a lot of them gems, that form in these pegmatite deposits. This here is a piece of the Himalaya pegmatite, which is in San Diego County. I told you I spent a lot of time kicking around there. This is from the Himalaya pegmatite dike, and at this point, this flat part is the wall, the hard outside wall, and then this is the actual pegmatite growing in, and the whole vein would have been a couple feet thick, and this is part of the wall. And you can see that along here the crystals are smaller, they get bigger and coarser, and of course in the middle of the dike they would have formed tourmaline and coarse crystals of other things. And that's how a lot of gems, a lot of different kinds of gemstones are produced. It's in these pegmatite dikes. Let me show you some more pictures of this kind of rock and how it forms, and we'll talk a little bit about it more.
Now, this is a kind of a model of what a pegmatite dike cutting through some rock might look like if you could kind of, so you could better envision how it would appear. And you could see that most of the white colored dike is solid, and of course it would have other minerals like tourmaline and things in it. But in places, especially more or less along the center line, you would have a gem pocket like shown here, where the vein kind of opens up and has these open spaces where the large crystals could grow. Now, just a minute ago, I showed you a chunk of rock that I have that's from the Himalaya Mine in San Diego County, and this is an actual picture from inside the mine, showing the vein behind the guy there, and of course, along the more or less the center line is the pocket zone, and you can see, as I said, it's about 2.5, maybe 3 feet at the most wide, and it has along there beautiful tourmaline crystals. And this is a close-up of an actual pocket from inside that mine that's filled with clay and tourmaline crystals that are super valuable. And this is how they would be after eons. The crystals tend to be, fallen down off of the walls, but sometimes they're well attached to the walls. The specimens that are better attached get a little bit of a premium, but still the crystals themselves are quite valuable.
Now, you might think that these pegmatite dikes are super duper rare and they just never occur, and there's only a few places in the world that have them, and that's just not the case. There's some areas where the pegmatite dikes, because they've produced a lot of gems, are really well documented, but there's also a whole lot of lesser known pegmatite deposits that are worth individual prospectors going after. Now, in a little while, I'm going to show you a worldwide map, a couple of them maybe, of different well-known pegmatite deposits and where they occur. On that map, you won't find any pegmatite deposits in my home state of Nevada. But I will tell you that I know of 6 productive pegmatite deposits in the state of Nevada, none of which are on those maps. There's, what I'm saying, the point is that there's a whole lot of obscure ones. And some of the obscure, lesser known ones in Nevada include, there's one up by Lake Tahoe near Incline Village that produced some huge, I've seen these crystals in person. They're like 2 foot long smoky quartz crystals, and they're like that big around. It also produced some much smaller crystals of sphene, some of which were gem quality sphene, sphene is interestingly, there's been some discoveries of it, and it's been becoming a more popular, better known mineral. It's been kind of rare as a gemstone, but there's a little bit more of it on the market, so people are starting to hear it and see it. But anyway, that pegmatite produced some gem quality sphene. Another one that I know of is in Pershing County in a place called Long Canyon. It has some tourmaline and other different things, but it's little known. Another is there's a whole area that has a bunch of pegmatite dikes that are rich in beryl. And the beryl comes in blue aquamarine colors and yellow, what they call heliodor, yellow beryl colors. And it's not known for a lot of pockets, but the area needs a lot more exploration. It hasn't been well looked at. It's just known that these pegmatite dikes are rich in beryl. In White Pine County, in the Wheeler Mountain area, generally speaking, there's some pegmatite dikes that have produced some gem quality aquamarine, very nice beryl crystals that are of a gem quality. There's a pegmatite dike in Mineral County that's east of Walker Lake, and that has produced some gem quality topaz crystals, and also some real nice amazonite and smoky quartz specimens, similar in quality to the famous specimens from Colorado. And finally, there's some pegmatites down in Clark County in southern Nevada. Clark County is the same county that Vegas is in, that have produced some really nice smoky quartz crystals. Let me show you some pictures of some of the really nice pegmatites from southern Nevada and some of the crystals that they produce.
So here's some beautiful specimens from the southern Nevada pegmatites. Some really great smoky quartz crystals, some nice feldspar matrix with them, but even there's a little bit of fluorite and spessartite garnet in here. And these are just little known pegmatites that some rockhounds have spent some time poking around and found some really beautiful specimens. And this is kind of my point. It's not just Nevada that has little known pegmatites. They're spread here and there all over states. And, it's something that really ought to be pursued by more people because, as you've seen, the specimens are hugely valuable.
Pegmatites tend to be most common in certain geologic environments, especially in environments where you have igneous rocks exposed at the surface or metamorphic rocks near igneous rocks. Sometimes the pegmatite, the last crystallization phase that I've talked about, it actually gets injected out of the igneous rock body and into nearby metamorphic rocks or something like that. Pegmatites, of course, have large crystals, but always the very best crystals, the highest quality crystals, the stuff that sells for the high dollar that I showed you earlier, those are found in pockets, basically in open spaces in the pegmatite dikes. These often form in dikes that were rich in water at one time, and so that the water is able to form this space and allow for really large crystals to grow in it. Like I say, the very best crystals are almost always in this, although some pretty good crystals can be found frozen in adjacent parts of the dike. Sometimes these cavities are clay filled because cracks in the rock will allow clay from the surface to seep down and fill the pockets. But inside these pockets are going to be the gem crystals, the exotic minerals, the really well-developed crystal forms, and the really valuable stuff that are found in pegmatite deposits. Like I mentioned, the rare elements like lithium, boron, beryllium, and such, these are what's found in that last pocket, which represents the last final cool down phase of the magma as it solidifies. Pockets can be both single pockets that just are pretty much surrounded by solid rock, or sometimes you get them in a series of pockets, one next to another, where you get one and then maybe there's a small opening to the next one and another small opening to the next one, and so you get a chain or series of these pockets. Let's take a look at some pegmatite pockets, some pictures that I have, and some images, and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
This is a kind of a museum recreation of a pocket. They've taken stuff that's come out of pockets, tourmaline and kunzite and quartz and feldspar, and put them back all together in a jumble, which is how they are found in the pockets. But in real life, pockets come as often as a big jumble of crystals. Here, a pocket full of tourmaline crystals is being dug out, and you can see a few crystals in the guy's hand, but behind his hand, just a jumble of crystals in clay behind him that will be dug out for their beautiful gem value. It's kind of a blurry photo, but it shows that oftentimes these pockets are cleaned out with water, hoses, and screens to wash away the clay and save the valuable crystals that are in the mix. These pegmatite pockets come in all sorts of sizes, from fairly small, like these two guys are working on here, to much larger sizes where you have to even crawl into the pocket, to get into the back of it. The pocket is the space behind him. All the way up to really huge ones that you could almost walk into as the entrance to the pocket. Like this giant example from a pegmatite in the state of Maine. but even smaller pockets can be just loaded with beautiful and valuable crystals.
So if you're out prospecting for pegmatite deposits, for these really nice crystals, the valuable crystals, how would you know when you find a dike, how would you know where in this dike to look for those really high grade, high value crystals? How are you going to find those gems? There are actually signs and indicators that miners of pegmatites, prospectors follow to lead them from one part of the dike into the part where the pocket is and where the high value minerals are. There are indicators that will help you know that there may be a valuable pocket of gemstones only a few feet away. The best places to search are in or around the core. So a lot of times the best of these pegmatites are zoned, and you have an outer part that's smaller crystals and less weird stuff, maybe a little scoral black tourmaline. And then as you get into the zone, the middle zones will be coarser crystals, and finally the coarsest stuff will be in the very core, the middle part of the pegmatite. And usually the pockets will be found either in the very middle, in the heart of the pegmatite, or around the core, where you have the intermediate phase and the core phase contact, where those contact. And that forms because basically as the core forms, then there's no place for the pocket and the last little bit of water and other rare elements. And so it ends up at the interface between the core and the intermediate zone. It's commonly observed that as you approach these pockets, the grain size of the crystals will get larger and larger. So as you may have half-inch size crystals, and then 3/4, 1 inch, 2 inch, and that happens as you're approaching a pocket. There can also be color changes as you or have a tourmaline. The tourmaline crystal growing toward a pocket may start out as black, change to green, and finally to pink as it enters the pocket. There are also other minerals that form in or around pockets. Lepidolite, which is a pinkish purple mica that contains lithium, will also appear in as you're getting close to those pockets, and often the pockets have lepidolite in them if you have a lithium-rich type of pegmatite. In a similar way, pink feldspars may change color to be the blue-green of amazonite as you approach a pocket. These kinds of changes are generally the best and strongest indicators when you're prospecting along a pegmatite dike that you're reaching an area where there's likely to be a pocket nearby. As I mentioned, the coarser the crystals, you may start seeing coarse mica crystals, not necessarily lepidolite, but coarse muscovite or coarse smoky quartz crystals that start to form in the dike. A lot of times the prospectors and miners of these dikes will use a long-handled screwdriver or other long tool to kind of probe areas. If you see an area that seems soft or has a clay-filled area, they'll probe in there to see if there's a space in there that's open, that there's you probe in there to see because the screwdriver will go through the clay. You can tell whether there's a pocket back there. And around the edges of these pockets, the pegmatite may be a little bit decomposed or broken up, and that also is an indicator of a place that you need to probe. Let's take a look at some photos and diagrams of pegmatites and their zoning and where you might find pockets in among them.
Here's a diagram of what a zoned pegmatite might look like. Now, they've given different colors, but the blue is marked as a border zone, and it might have, comparatively coarse crystals compared to the rock around it, but still comparatively small. A wall zone, which may have graphic granite or other types of feldspar and quartz material. And then an albite zone, which is kind of shown as lavender. And then the intermediate zone for the core, which is marked as green. And then the core zone, which is that marked as kind of a tan, and it's shown with lines in it, and it says core margin, large crystals of tourmaline, beryl, or spodumene, which is kunzite and other related minerals. And so it is either around the edge of the core that you get these pockets of rich minerals, or in the very center of the core that you might find these pockets. It depends on how big the vein is. Bigger pegmatite dikes tend to be more zoned, whereas the smaller ones, the zones, of course, are much smaller, but they're oftentimes less obvious.
Now, there are loads of places where you might make a productive search for pegmatite deposits and find some really great crystals. I mentioned, that in Nevada there are some little known ones. Well, there are little known ones in other states as well. California is famous for its pegmatites in San Diego County and elsewhere in Southern California, but there are pegmatites in Northern California too in places. Not as famous, but they produce some nice stuff. The best known gem-bearing pegmatites in the U.S. are in, of course, Southern California, in New England, in Colorado, and North Carolina. Those are the best known ones. But there are also valuable pegmatite deposits in other parts of the United States. Lesser known deposits in the U.S. include the Sawtooth Batholith in Idaho, the Mason County, Texas topaz deposits, Eastern Nevada, as I mentioned, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and South Carolina as well. There are known pegmatite deposits at several locations in Australia too. Other productive locations for pegmatites around the world include the Hindu Kush region of Afghanistan, Russia, Ukraine, of course, Minas Gerais in Brazil, Nigeria, Mozambique, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, the Czech Republic, India, and Vietnam. There are also some newly discovered pegmatite deposits in newly accessible areas that are part of East Africa, Madagascar, and Afghanistan. Many more new discoveries of pegmatites and pegmatite gems will be made in the future, and of course a lot of those will be made in developing nations that have been lesser explored for these types of deposits. They'll be found in areas where, like I say, you have igneous rocks with magma that have cooled slowly, and the pegmatites will be found either in those igneous rocks or in some adjacent metamorphic rocks. Let's take a look at some maps of pegmatite gem deposits worldwide.
Here's a map of the world that shows some of the most famous and best known pegmatites. It mentions the Himalaya pegmatite in San Diego area, Impala, California, another San Diego area type of pegmatite. And of course, it shows also the ones in Maine and New England. But it shows different pegmatites that are famous for yielding gemstones all over the world. However, there are loads more than what are shown on here. These are only a few of the most famous ones. But just to make a point, here is a close-up map of the San Diego, Riverside County area and some of the pegmatites that are there. And instead of 2, which the map I just showed you showed for San Diego, here is 14 listed. And I can tell you that even this map that shows 14 does not include all of the different pegmatites in this area that have yielded gemstones. So there are lots of little-known pegmatites. And kicking around these well-known pegmatite areas, if you can get permission to be taking through some of the old prospects, there can be some nice finds. This is actually me when I'm in my early 20s, poking through a rather large pegmatite. This dike at this point was probably a good 30, 40 feet thick, and you can see the openings that they made. But they found some nice gemstones here. And here's a nice pink beryl crystal that I found on the dump of that mine. And while, this is not a $150,000 mineral specimen. It has good crystal faces and good pink color, and it's about 3 inches square. It's probably worth several $1,000s. My point is that these areas are well worth prospecting and following up on.
Finding areas with pegmatites that are obscure or little known, like the ones I mentioned in Nevada, takes research. And this means research on the internet, old reports, geologic maps, rockhound type information that you might find. And there are, in both Southern California and the Northeast, there are some widespread series of various pegmatites. Now, I get people who ask me about prospecting in the East, and yes, there's certainly gold in the Northeast, but maybe not as much as in the Western states. But there are huge areas of pegmatite deposits, and some really nice gemstones have been found in the northeastern U.S. So there's an area that's well worth prospecting. To find these kinds of gemstones, it takes a commitment to get out and search and really do some exploration and digging in. And that's work, but it's a skill also. And it's the skill of prospecting. But like I say, I've shown you from the pictures at the beginning of this video, the finds can be incredibly valuable. Now, prospecting is a skill, and in fact, all aspects of prospecting have to do with a skill and knowledge that you have to be able to go out and make finds. If you don't know what you're doing, your chances of making a find are definitely much less. Now, to help you gain the skill of prospecting in all the different related facets, I wrote a book. It's called Fistful of Gold, and it's mostly about gold, I admit, but there's also information about recognizing minerals, about understanding geology, and related stuff that would be useful to someone prospecting for pegmatites too. And I wrote this book, and it's really an encyclopedia, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book right now.
So this is my book, Fistful of Gold. You can see it's an encyclopedia distilling down my 45 plus years of prospecting experience plus my degree into the parts that you need to know. I spent most of 10 years writing this. It was not just a simple effort that, I sat down and wrote it. You can see it's like 250,000 words. It's not something you're going to read through in a day or maybe even a week or more. But it's got a lot of information and reference material that you can come back to. You can read it once and read it again and get more out of it because there's just that much depth of material in this. I wrote this book because I want you to have the skills to go out and find fistfuls of gold for yourself. And if you have the skills and know what you're doing and get out in the field and make a real effort, you can find significant gold. It's not easy. I'm not going to tell you that because, gold, it wouldn't be, close to $2,000 an ounce, which is what it is right now. It wouldn't be so expensive if it was easy to find. It's not easy. You just can't walk out into an old gold field and start picking up nuggets. If the gold was easy to see and find, the old timers would have picked it up and taken it themselves. So you got to have skill. You got to know what you're doing. You got to be able to master what it takes to find gold, and you've got to have the persistence and put in the effort to find the material, to find the gold or diamonds or gemstones that you're looking for. Now, this book has geology, it has facts about gold, it has stuff about diamonds and platinum, but it's mostly about gold deposits, how gold deposits form, how placer and nuggets form, all the questions you probably wanted to ask. The book is available on Amazon, and I'll put a link to it in the description below, but you can look up on Amazon, Fistful of Gold, and by Chris Ralph, and find this book. Now, the book, if you look at it, it has a very high rating. It has like a 4.7 or 4.8 out of 5, which is really high. I mean, it's hard to please everybody, but I'm close to a 5 out of 5, not far from it, right? So it's been out. I've sold more than 15,000 copies of this book, And I've had tremendous response, tremendous positive response by the people who buy it. And I think if you buy it, you'll be just as happy with it. Now, in addition to my book, I also have a website that I do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my website and show you some images from the website right now.
Now, my website is nevadaoutbackgems.com, and I'll put a link to the prospecting page, this prospecting encyclopedia page, down in the description below, but you can find it at Nevada Outback Gems. I sell some jewelry, turquoise, other gemstones there. I don't always keep the inventory perfectly up to date, so if you're interested in anything you see, do contact me first before trying to send me money or anything, because I want you to be able to get what you order. But the website has lots of different stories, old adventures, even some stories, true stories from the old-time miners of the 1800s. So I think it's something you'll find interesting.
The other thing I want to go back to is that all my comments, I want you guys to ask questions on the comments for my videos. I answer 100% of the comments that are made on my videos. Now, sometimes if somebody just says, hey, great video, I really enjoyed it, the comment may just be, well, I'm really glad you liked it. Or if it's a simple question. And sometimes I get people who ask me questions, I would take a book to answer that question. And I recommend that they just buy the book. But I answer all my questions. I try to help people as much as I can. I'm here to help you. So if you're interested in gaining the skills, if you're interested in knowing what you need to know to be successful, follow along with me. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so that they'll let you know when I come out with new videos, and I try to do that pretty much every Saturday morning. And you'll enjoy with me, you'll come along with me, we'll have an adventure together, and we will find some nice gold and see what it's really like getting out in the woods, or the deserts, or the mountains, wherever we land, wherever the gold is, wherever the diamonds are, wherever the platinum is. Come along, we'll have some fun. And I'll see you real soon on the next video.